It's a good thing the topic that we're talking about today is the topic we're talking about today, because you're going to need heaps of it afterwards. What is real faith? It's the A-team again.
It is the
Yeah, it's great to have you here. To my immediate left,
Yes, sir.
we have Bishop TJ.
Greetings.
Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.
You're looking well rested.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I just
don't
say,
feel-
DJ was in a recording just before this,
Yeah.
and he's going to be in a recording just after this.
What?
He is a superstar.
Yeah,
He's
We
amazing.
are privileged to have him in our midst.
I just want to let everybody who's become a bit of a TJ fanboy, fangirl, he may...
Just say the girl as well. Otherwise, we're
Yeah.
in dangerous territory here.
We may not be able to afford you. Moving swiftly along. To TJ's left, the lovely Felony.
Oh, thank you, Leon.
Rumor has it you've been getting all kinds of gifts today. What
That's
have you
true.
been... Why?
I've been receiving chocolates from staff.
I want to know the story behind that.
It's a secret.
Maybe later. Maybe later. And then to your left, Mel,
Yes,
how you doing?
I'm fine.
That's good. Are you feeling better?
I'm getting there.
Okay,
If I
your
sniff
voice-
into the microphone,
Yes.
Tootsie, you're going to have to sort it out.
It's the classic, I'm fab.
I'm fine, guys. I'm really fine. If I pass out because I can't breathe, then I'm fine. No, I'm just kidding. I'm all good. Thanks, Leon.
That's
I
good.
mean, Donnie.
That's good.
What's your name?
That's Donnie.
Okay, Donnie.
Well, I'm very glad that you're here.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Yes. And then to your left, we have Dr. Bishop, Dr. Pastor Heinz Oldewacher.
My name is Heinz, and I haven't received any chocolates today.
Yeah, and
So he's
that's...
grumpy.
Yeah, understandably.
Yeah.
So, not sure what I can do about that. I've been watching some great comedy online today. Like, I really thought that I'd have one-liners lined up, but I think it's the topic that we're going to be discussing today. Like when you get saved as a Christian, maybe I'm the only one, but when you get saved as a Christian, like there's certain words get integrated into your vocabulary and you don't even think about them. And today's topic is one of them, the whole issue of faith.
Faith.
Like there's many facets to it. And again, I don't actually have a hard and fast opinion on what is the faith thing. So I'm very glad that we're going to be able to speak about that today, because I need to learn from you guys and girls.
Yes.
Yes.
So who wants to kick this one off? Faith. What's the topic? It's
What is real faith?
what is real faith?
Strokes beard.
Isn't there a George Michael song about you got to have faith?
Yes.
Gotta have faith.
Ka-ching, ka-ching. I gotta have faith. Ka-ching, ka-ching. I gotta have faith. I gotta have. Yeah,
That's
that's called
it.
faith.
For,
So it's obviously
for some reason, I imagine that what George Michael imagined with faith is not going to be similar to what we.
Yeah, you got to
Never
ask
mind.
the big burning question: what was he having faith in?
Yeah.
It's true.
Yes. Okay, I'll get us started with a scripture verse. How about
Excellent.
that?
That's a good place to
The
start.
classic faith scripture verse, Hebrews 11, verse 1, says, "Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see." Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see.
So basically, the power of positive thinking, or voodoo. I mean, I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and when you try and explain it to a non-believer, they just say, "Oh yeah, like an Oprah kind of thing." But it's really not. It's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's definitely more than that, because for me the instructive word is what is real faith. So there must be
Yeah.
real faith and not so real faith, or fake faith. And for me, I think I would be so bold as to make the statement, from the beginning, that real faith, as I understand it, cannot be divorced from faith in God. So we're not talking about
That's it.
sort of this wishy-washy faith in whatever, but we're talking about faith in God. I'm reminded of a verse that, one of the kind of shorter verses where Christ just said, have faith in God. He didn't say in yourself or in anything, have faith in God. So for me, the starting point of the discussion about real faith is it's got to be in God.
I think people confuse faith and what most people think about when they think about faith is actually willpower. It's like, hey man, you just got to have faith that this thing will happen. So if I really, really, really will it very, very hard that this thing is going to happen, then it's going to happen. I think people confuse faith and willpower.
Well, they're kind of the antithesis. That's the opposite of real faith, isn't it? Because faith is knowing that God's got it all under control. Like if we take it all the way back, when you become a Christian, all you have is the faith that you are now saved. Like you are saved by grace through faith alone. That's it. You're saved by grace through faith alone. So when you make that decision to become a Christian, the only thing you're riding on is the faith that God's going to, you can take him at his word.
So we better have a good definition of what that faith actually entails.
Yeah.
Otherwise we're fooling ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like it it does tie in with trust and belief
Yeah.
in God.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do that in order to have faith in him. And also just kind of faith is like one of the fruits of the spirit.
Yeah. Another misconception about faith that I've often heard is the whole idea that faith is really it's like wishful thinking. It's wishing for something against the obvious evidence that to the contrary. So it's almost like this foolish thing that you do. You just go, well, regardless of the circumstances, I'm just really gonna hope very, very hard that things turn out differently.
Yeah.
And that is now faith. It's kind of positive thinking kind of vibe.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, faith is
Positive thinking.
it is thinking positive, but it's not the power of positive thinking. It's not because you're thinking positively about something that it comes to pass.
Yeah, I think positive thinking is an outcome of real faith.
Yes, not vice versa, which is what kind of the world, that Oprah version of faith is. That that, like you say, if you really, really, really will it into being. But as I've learned from these very insightful chats that we've been having, in Christianity, there's actually very little that we do that results in anything. Basically, everything comes from God.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a good starting point. That's a good starting point. The verse that I just read earlier, Hebrews 11, the one that I grew up with, the version that I grew up with is actually the King James version, which I love, is, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Funny enough, we always focus on when we quote this passage, we focus on the things hoped for and the things not seen. But it says here that faith is the substance of things I hope for, the evidence of things not seen. So that to me is a good starting point as to what faith really is. It talks about substance. It talks about evidence. It's not a wishy-washy, airy-fairy, hoping really hard kind of faith. It is faith that's based on something of substance.
So it gets used as a verb, but also as a noun. It's an actual, like, faith is a quantifiable thing. Like, it's according to that verse, it's actual substance. It's got a physicalness to it.
Yeah, well, I think we read the things hoped for and the things not seen, and then we go, well, faith is about wishing really hard for those things, right? The things that you haven't seen come to pass yet, and the things that you're hoping for. And of course, that's part of the equation here. Yes, you are talking about things that you're hoping for. You are talking about things not seen. But the emphasis here is on the Faith is the substance. It's the evidence. Faith is faith in something or someone. I should rather say. It's not an approach to life or a way of approaching a situation. It is based on someone or something.
There's a scripture that I actually wrote on my hand. I was saying to everyone before we started recording, it's 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7, and it says that we live by faith and not by sight. And linking that to the scripture you're talking about now, Heinz, what I love about the scripture in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, it's actually not living this positive, it takes that whole positive thinking mindset out of the equation, because we're not living by sight. We're living by the assurance that it's of evidence of things not seen. Like it's actually, sight doesn't count in relation to God. So it's actually not about us. So the positive thinking thing, it's useless, because if we're positive thinking, we're living by sight. I don't know if that makes sense, but if we're living by faith and not by sight, takes sight out of the equation. It takes positive thinking out of the equation and puts God right smack into the middle of it.
In positive thinking, you need the thing to happen in order to validate what you're believing, quote unquote. But in actual faith, I could have the worst day, month, week, year ever, and things could be going absolutely haywire. Everything's going wrong. My world is falling apart, but my faith remains as strong as ever. That doesn't influence or impact on my faith whatsoever.
Yeah.
In fact, Heinz, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that Hebrews 11 is filled with names of people who actually died because of their faith, and none of what they hoped for came to pass. Many of them lost their lives. The Bible talks about them being sawn in two. Some of them were beheaded. Some of them were fed to lions. And all of that still holding on to this faith. So it was something bigger than just the fulfillment of what they wanted. It was, I think, a conviction in the nature of God. Like, I'm so convinced He loves me. Regardless of what happens to me, I still believe in Him. In fact, one of my favorite scriptures in the Bible is when the young men were thrown into I think it was the fire. And one of the statements they made is, we believe that God can rescue us from this fire, but even if He does not, we will still not bow to this, to this statue that Nebuchadnezzar had put up. So for me, just that idea that regardless of what happens to me, I will still believe, tells me that faith is something that is bigger than just our personal, fancy or whatever. It's something far greater, rooted in deep relationship.
There's Abraham who never really saw the outworking of what God promised in his lifetime. He couldn't, right? He could, it's a physical impossibility. And yet he's counted as a hero of the faith. Why? Because his faith was in something that transcended his circumstances, that transcended his hopes and dreams for himself and the people around him. It transcended all of that.
So there's kind of like a dichotomy to the concept of faith then, where it's like that whole thing of joy versus happiness, where the world's version of faith would be, it's like happiness. Happiness is it's temporal. If you have faith in something and that something comes to pass, then you can be happy. You can, then that was an act of faith. But the Christian understanding of faith, or the Christian concept of faith, like a faith in God, a faith in Jesus, is regardless of whether what I'm hoping for comes to pass, I still have that joy, that assurity that, it's not working out the way that I wanted it to, but that's okay, because God's still on His throne. He's still in control.
So I want to throw something out, and then you guys tell me if you agree with me or not. But whenever I think about faith, and I think about how I can possibly distill this into one line as to, what is this thing called faith and how do I define it? I think the easiest way for me to do that, a starting point at least, is Romans 10 verse 9. It says, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That, I think, is a starting point. That's the basis of our faith. Our faith is our trust in Jesus, in who he is and what he came to do on the cross and what that implies about us and our ultimate destiny and what it says about God and who he is. That, I think, is potentially a good starting point from which to begin to understand faith. What says you? Agree? Or?
Yeah, I agree. We've been a couple of times in these talks. With the sort of the root of the issue is it's becoming very apparent, and maybe you guys knew it, but I'm only just starting to realize it. Is the heart of the issue is actually the heart of the issue. Like it all starts in your heart. Because that verse that you just spoke about, where if you declare with your mouth and believe in your heart. So that's kind of the trigger. I think the key there is that you can proclaim to have faith, but if it's not a heart issue, you don't have faith.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Heavy days. So the power of faith. Like, let's get down to the practical side of things, like the Hogwarts version of faith, where, Jesus speaks about...
Hogwarts version of faith.
Jesus speaks about the Hogwarts.
If you...
that part where Jesus talks about Harry Potter.
It's in second Gryffindor, verse 6.
So confused.
Where
Faith
Jesus
is
talks
powerful.
about... Hey?
Faith is a powerful thing.
No, exactly. Jesus says that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, I think everybody misunderstands that verse. And please don't base your theology on what I'm about to say. But the idea is that, Jesus is saying, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can tell a mountain. Now, we're fortunate enough to be based in beautiful Cape Town, which is known for its beautiful mountain. If some Christian comes and tells Table Mountain to get up and throw itself into the sea, there's going to be a problem.
A lot of Cape Townians are going to be upset about that.
There's going to be a problem. But this is what that verse is saying.
Yeah.
So that's not what it's saying. But the idea, faith changes things.
Yeah.
But it does say just after that, nothing will be impossible for you, which I think is a nice little follow-on from that.
Yes. Yes. Now, if we...
kind of makes it a little bit more...
So if we take it
accessible.
back a step into the heart issue. Now, okay, this might be sort of getting off topic a little bit, but would a heart that's accepted, a mouth that's declared Jesus as Lord and a heart that's accepted Jesus as Lord, is that going to be the kind of heart that's going to tell Table Mountain to get up and throw itself into the sea? Maybe.
Probably
I'd
not.
love to see that.
It would be a horrible person.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's a everything works together. It's like everything's connected.
Yeah.
Like we can trace everything back from this moment to the shifting of the first iceberg when the planet had just been created. All of these cause and effects happened from that first moment to where we are now.
The whole question of can see he's getting a little sweaty there. He's really excited. But yeah,
been a day.
It's been quite a day. The power of faith, that's interesting because we've talked already about the fact that real faith, and I have to be careful with my words here, but it's not, I think real faith is more preoccupied with a deeper understanding or revelation of Jesus Christ than with me.
Yeah.
100%.
So then, this is interesting. This is actually quite cool. I may actually lose my cool like Donnie just now.
It is one of those
It
topics,
is
right? It's one of those topics.
Because then what is its point then if, okay, human nature generally just wants to see results. We want to see things happen. We want things to be better for ourselves. If we're saying faith sometimes will not yield the results that we want, are you guys with me still?
Yeah.
What is its point? What is its power? I'm trying to stick with this, the power of faith question. Do it make
That's a
sense?
good one. That's a good
Yeah.
one. Because I believe you're going to get, there's only one of three answers. Yes, no, and maybe.
Yeah.
So we can ask. And a very practical example is my wife and I at the moment, we try pray every night, but that doesn't happen. So let's say 3 times a week. But we take that opportunity to pray together for our family, but it's mainly about petition. It's mainly about asking God or laying out our desires for our family and where we would like to be and the things we'd like to do, and laying that out, in front of God. And we see results. When we pray into things, we see results. But there's some things that just don't come to pass. So even though, ultimately God he's the referee of this whole game. So he's got the right to say yes, no, or maybe.
Yeah.
And that is his sovereignty. So I don't know if that helps you at all, but
Yeah.
but God, the answer is not always going to be yes.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to the point that faith really is about faith in God, because it's a trust, as Phil said earlier. Trust in the fact that whatever it is I'm asking for, it might be big, it might be as huge as this mountain that I want to drop into the sea. Whatever God's answer is, I trust because I trust Him.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah. I
Is
think
that part of it?
I think faith has an object, and that object is Jesus Christ, right? That's why we have faith. Is not a means to an end. Faith is not a way to get what I want.
Yeah.
Faith is not an avenue that I pursue in order to see the results that I want or achieve something that I want. Faith has an object. I'm sitting with John 20, verse 31 in front of me. It says, "But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in His name." That's the point of faith. That's what it's all about. And I think it's very telling that we always go, somehow, one way or the other, we make these things about us
Yeah.
and about our selfish desires
Yeah.
and about what we want from life rather than about God. And I think that's part of the challenge.
Surely, if faith is put in our hearts or imparted in our hearts by God, it can never work against the will of God.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's something like you were saying now. It's one of those things. It isn't about us at the end of the day, and I have to trust as well that if we are asking God or believing God for something, that we also have within us, because He's imparted faith in our hearts, that it's actually okay, because we have faith that it's okay, because God's will is God's will. I don't know if I'm connecting the two together well in my words, but the two, will of God and faith, can't be separated because faith comes from God. It comes from Jesus.
Do you remember that time where everyone went bananas about this book and DVD called The Secret, which was all about the law of attraction, right? So if you think positive thoughts and if you put out positive energy and you say the right things, then you will attract wealth and you'll attract, good things will come your way, basically, right? That's what that whole thing was about. And people loved it because it became this thing where, it's this secret formula that I can use to achieve what I want to achieve. It's this great little trick or tool or something that I can use to get what I want. And I think it's worth talking less and less about faith in those terms and more in terms of what you just said, Mel, faith in God, because then yes, you're tying it to God's will, what He wants for me, not so much what I want for myself.
Having said that, though, and this may be controversial, and please feel free to eject me from the studio.
We don't do controversial here.
If I say something that that's kind of tricky, but I do think God has invested tremendous power in us as people, such that, for example, when people talk about And I don't believe in this. As a Christian, I don't center my life around this kind of thinking. But for example, if you can think it, you can achieve it. I think there is validity to that, only to the extent that, yes, by working hard, by thinking certain thoughts, we can attract certain things. However, that is not faith in the sense that we're talking about it today, because the whole issue of the will of God that Mel was talking about just now comes into play, that sometimes man, even though he has tremendous power and potential to achieve certain things, may not always attract things with wisdom.
Yes.
So we want certain things, but they may not necessarily be they may not necessarily be the best for us, nor may they be the wisest for us.
Yeah.
But that does not mean they can't be achieved. They can. Where I think faith comes in, and again, the point about the will of God is so important again, is we can still dream big dreams and still desire great things, but also trust in God's wisdom
Yes.
about what is good for us and what is not good for us. So there is that delicate dance, you know. So for example, when people write books like The Secret, I think it's centered in human wisdom
Very much,
and knowledge and stuff. It may not necessarily be, no, that's fake, it won't happen. It may happen, but it may not be God's perfect plan for
Yeah.
a person's life.
I think a lot of that, it comes out of, it's the outcomes of real faith.
Yeah.
Rather than the substance of real
Yes.
faith. If I truly believe in Jesus and in God and what He's done for me, then I will look at life differently. Then I will, more often than not, make choices that take me forward, that take me in the right direction, that take me in a direction that speaks of wisdom, and you move in the right direction if your starting point is the right starting point. If faith in Jesus is your starting point, you have a good starting point. If faith in yourself or faith in some universal principle, whatever that may mean, is your starting point, then you may not be going in the right direction.
I agree, but I think something like, what's the book called?
The Secret.
A book like The Secret is, a lot of those techniques, if you want to call it that, are based on biblical principles.
Sure.
And biblical principles work regardless of whether you're a Christian or not. Like the idea of sowing and reaping, that's a universal principle. And a lot of these books kind of take that almost as the thing instead of a fruit of the main thing. And you can apply them to your life and you probably will see some results. But again, it's not, it's very temporal.
Yeah.
It just depends what you want from your life, I suppose. But you know, maybe a book like that will give you the principles to be able to live a comfortable life while you're here. Eternally, not much consequence.
Yeah. Sorry.
No,
you
go,
can-
please go.
I don't think that you can almost quantify someone's faith by how successful they are. And I think that that's almost an assumption that people can make is, well, this person's done so, like, they're so rich and they've got this and they've worked their way up the corporate ladder and the whole, you got to have faith attitude. And, you know, I think that you can be someone who lives a very humble existence, but you can be full of faith. It doesn't. The two don't have to be married. You know, it's prosperity and faith are not the same thing, and I think that that's something that people like to link together a lot.
That's important. That's an important point that you've said there, because Christianity today, especially Western Christianity today, those two are the complete bedfellows. And there's some very prominent preachers who have built their ministries on that.
Where God just becomes the divine vending machine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
From what we've been saying here, I'm seeing there's two ways that you can look at faith. Like there's that miracle working faith, where, you know, you pray for somebody to get healed and you believe that person's going to get healed and they get healed. But then there's also that faith that you take into your everyday life, that it's that faith that we've been talking about, that God has my best interest at heart. So regardless of what the day throws at me, I have faith that it's going to work out for the best.
Yeah.
But we haven't really touched on that miracle working faith yet. And I think that's important because it is just as valid. And I've seen this in like I said, we pray for our family and issues within the family and things and stuff, you know, like the obvious stuff where we are praying in line with what we would perceive to be God's will. But then we've seen, you know, we've prayed for things which we just want.
Yeah.
Like we would really love to have X, Y, and Z, and we've prayed into it, and God's given us that. So it's not a one-dimensional thing. Like it's as diverse as every single person. It's as diverse as every single person's moods from one minute to the next. It's it's a slippery snake to grab hold of.
I think it depends on what are you talking about when you say miracle working faith. I wouldn't have even thought that there was real faith and then there was miracle working faith.
Well, like a miracle working faith where you are driving with your family and a truck comes barreling down at you and you shoot off a quick, "Oh Lord," prayer, truck hits you and everybody walks away fine. You know, it's, or water into wine, or walking on water, or touching somebody and they get healed. You know, those are miracles, but they're based in faith. Like for us to do something like that, you really got to have faith that something like that's going to happen. Now, whether or not God was going to do it if you don't have faith, you know, that's another discussion. But you see it on the crusade fields all the time. Like thousands of people come up to the front for prayer, and people get healed in droves. They get healed.
Yeah.
That to me is miracle working faith.
If a miracle happens to happen, then that's just because there's an accumulation of faith for many years from the time you've given your life to Jesus. I wouldn't make it a miracle working faith.
Well,
I wouldn't say that somebody needs to have a specific amount of faith for something to happen. I think God will make anything happen in your life as long as you trust Him.
Yeah, but that is yes, because we do tend to think about faith as something that comes in quantities. You know, we think of the way that Jesus said, "You have little faith." Faith is not. You don't have a faith tap that you open and then when you get to a certain amount, then some things happen. But if you get a little bit less than that, you know, if you go a little bit under the red line, then it doesn't happen. I don't think if you see faith as ultimately believe in Jesus, then that line of thinking becomes almost irrelevant. It's do you have faith in Jesus, yes or no? And by that faith, you move in your everyday life. And sometimes that means you see wonderful miracles, and sometimes that means you just get to live another day. It's one thing to my mind. It's integrated.
Yeah. Yeah, but then there's people who like faith is a gift. You have the gift of faith, or is it the gift of?
It is a gift of healing.
The gift of faith. So we all have faith, but some people operate at a different level of it. Now,
I wouldn't say they have more of it. I would say they are more in tune with it, if I can put it that way.
If I would disagree to a degree, because if you say you're operating in that realm, you have the gift of faith, and you see miracles happening around you because of faith.
Yeah.
So you pray for people, they get healed. You do that, and you're doing it more and more often. Your faith builds, and faith does build. Like it becomes easier to believe God for.
I wonder if it's not more accurate to say that you are more attuned to the reality of who Jesus is. That you are more attuned to the object of faith, Jesus. That you somehow. That could be defined as the gift of faith, is that you just have this default deep sense of who Jesus is and what your faith is about. I don't know if I'm even putting it the right way.
Faith. Is that what you're trying to say? You become more aware of.
Yeah, because the thing is, if you say faith in Jesus is faith in Jesus, then you either believe in Jesus or you don't. You can't believe in Jesus more than the person next to you.
But
You can
some
believe
people-
in him or not. But I would say some people are more attuned to the implications of what that means. So I believe in Jesus, therefore I can pray about this thing and see an actual result right away. Or
But then what you're saying is if we all have equal amounts, then we should all be able to do that, and we should all be seeing it. I think people
Well,
who
we
have
should.
the gift,
we should.
yeah, but then what's stopping it? So, because I pray for somebody and they don't get healed, it doesn't mean that my belief or my level of belief in Jesus is less than, the next person who comes along and lays hands on this person and they're healed instantly.
I think I do agree when you say we all have a gift of faith, but we all don't leave God in it all the time. And sometimes it becomes more about us and we remove God from the equation. And then it becomes hope and not faith.
Yeah, but then not always. Like, I may actually really, really believe that this person that I'm laying hands on is going to get healed, and they just don't get healed. It's not like them being...
But hold on a second. Now you're going, I may actually believe that this person's going to get healed. The thing that gets that person healed, I don't think is my willing it to be so.
Yeah.
Like, I think what makes that person, what heals that person, who heals that person is Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then to say that this person, when I lay hands on them, this person doesn't get healed is because I'm doing it either for the wrong motives, but surely God wants everybody to be healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not outside of his will.
I think that if what we believe is that we have relationship with God, if our faith is built on the relationship that we have, I do think that there are people who have walked with God longer. Maybe I don't want to suggest that people have different levels of faith in the sense that someone is lesser and someone is greater. But I do think there are people who have walked for longer. Their relationship maybe has grown deeper. They have a greater understanding of God. And I think with any relationship, I think that the longer, I've been married for almost 4 years. I know once my husband and I have been married for 20 years, I will know him far better than I know him now. And surely that relationship and that walking together with God, committing everything to him, living that life of faith is going to, what's the word? Manifest itself. I don't like using that word because it sounds so Christian, but it's going to reveal itself in ways maybe through healing or someone prays. I'm throwing that out there.
My wife has so much faith in me, right? So my wife has faith in me that I will take care of certain situations. So when we walk down the street and some big bad oak comes running down the street with his hands out, running towards us, he's going to choke us or something, my wife will immediately duck out because she knows I'm going to take care of this guy.
Yeah.
But you could also envision a scenario where my wife doesn't know me that well yet, and she does not have that instinctive trust in me just yet, where this oak comes running down the street with his hands outstretched, wanting to choke her, and she somehow tries to fight back in some way, right? So that's how, I don't know if that's a useful analogy, but that's how I tend to see what's the difference between those who with a lot of faith versus a little faith. It's not in the amount, it's in the level of intimacy.
Yes,
it's
trust.
my wife trusts me so much
Yes.
that she won't even think twice. She'll instinctively duck out of the way so that I can take care of the situation.
Yeah.
But had that been on our first day together, I'd hazard a guess and say that she would be more likely
Yeah.
to try and take this guy on her own, because she doesn't yet have that level of trust in me. Even though if you ask her on our first date, do you trust me? She would probably say, yes, I do trust him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
There's a couple of years ago, I actually had the privilege to go to Nigeria to one of Reinhard Bonnke. I don't know if the people will know who are listening. Reinhard Bonnke is an evangelist who has been world famous, actually, not the nicest way of putting it, actually, and people have known him as someone who prays for people and people get healed. And if you have a conversation, I went to one of the crusades that he was preaching at, and if you have a conversation with Reinhard Bonnke, there is a man who I would explain or describe as a giant of the faith. You talk to this man and he is a giant. And it's not because his name has been up in lights, but it's because you can just...
You instantly know it.
You sense it, yeah. You just know that this man, he does walk with God. He has that intimacy with Jesus. And it shows itself in his life and the fruit that comes from that. And I think from a point of view of someone who, I haven't been a Christian for as long as he has, and it's evident. It's just an evident, and I don't believe he has more faith than I do. And that probably sounds very arrogant, but I know and I respect the intimacy that he experiences with God, the relationship. Yeah, that's a whole nother level. That's a whole nother level.
I'm still struggling to get away from the fact that I do still believe that certain people operate in a different faith level. And maybe it's because faith is proportionate to trust, like we've been saying. Like you trust in God, therefore your faith becomes easier to trust Him.
The two are.
Yeah, I mean it's proportional. Like
they're the same thing.
When you say faith levels, because I actually agree with you, but it's more that maybe we just need to articulate it a little more. When you talk about that those levels of faith, are you talking about it by virtue of those people deliberately working on that? Or because the idea of a gift of faith, again, I think maybe might confuse certain people. Certainly at times it confuses me. Is that something that is just bestowed upon someone, or do you work on it? What are the aspects of faith that we work on, and what are the aspects of faith that are sort of granted? Perhaps for me is like the example of Reinhard that Mel just mentioned. For me, when I hear a talk like that, I would think of a man who has worked on his relationship with God by at times sacrificing certain things, being obedient at a level at which others maybe may not have, being willing to go that extra mile in the relationship, thereby deepening it, and thereby also, to use the Christian cliche, grow his faith muscle. But I think that's what he's had to do to reach that level. Is that what we're talking about here? Or
I think that miraculous, that faith, that kind of faith that Reinhard operates in, where he can go in front of 250,000 people and pray for healing, and 20,000 people will be healed of serious ailments. I think any one of us around this table can exercise, can operate at that level if it was God's will.
Yeah.
But that's because it's a gift that's been given to us for that moment. Like I believe the gifts get bestowed. Like you get certain people that sort of major in a gifting, but I believe that all those gifts are available to us, and God kind of activates them at the right time through us when He needs us to have it. But then somebody like Reinhard, who just kind of lives there, like he's in the red line of faith all the time. That's a different kind of faith. That's a different level of faith. I do still believe that people have different amounts of faith, for lack of a better word, because of the way they've seen God operate throughout their lives. Like Reinhard's got a reason for having the kind of faith that he has, because he's seen it happen over and over and over again.
Isn't that something that's grown then? Like it's something that...
Yeah, so it's bigger, it's greater.
Does it say in the
I
Bible
think faith
anywhere?
is reinforced.
But then it becomes our ability. It's sort of like, if it's all God, if it's all Jesus that's doing it, He is the author and perfecter of what we believe, right? He is. Then we all have the ability to be able to do that because we all have Him inside of us. So that's a gift that He can switch on in us whenever He needs it. But other people operate there continuously. So that's a different level of faith, if you know what I'm saying. Like a quantifiable, it seems quantifiable.
God
Yes.
doesn't give us different amounts of faith when we get saved.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think that I don't think He goes, okay,
But
I'm
it
gonna,
grows.
Because
I'm
how?
yes,
Because
that's
but
a
how?
different thing,
How
though,
does it
yeah.
grow? If
It's like
if
your
faith
capacity
yes,
to
yes,
relationship.
that I can.
So faith is proportional
That I
to
get.
trust. To relationship, faith is...
Also, is it not? So we are given the gift of faith, and certain people are given the gift of healing. It doesn't mean that you need to have like an extra amount of faith as compared to somebody else in order to be able to heal somebody, because that's a gift on its own that God will give to you. So if that gentleman has come to that point of being able to heal people, then that's because he's been given that gift of healing, not because he's got any more faith than Melanie does.
So if he was having an off day, actually, this is very true because I've spoken to somebody who actually works for his organization, a lady who goes off into Africa and does crusades like Reinhard does. And she's admitted that there's been times when she's praying for somebody and she just doesn't, there's just nothing. Yeah. It's like she's going through the motions, but God intervenes. God steps in and He makes it happen.
Yes.
So if we were working on a bucket of faith, even though her bucket was empty, God still honored her prayer. That doesn't actually help at all. I'm as confused as I was when I started this conversation.
Yes, because if you believe that 2 + 2 = 4, can you believe in that more or less? You can't, can you?
Well, Stephen Hawking actually had a very interesting...
What you can do is over time, as you work with numbers, you develop a keener sense of how they work. You develop a keener sense of what the outcome is when you add this thing to that thing. So you become more intimate with these numbers and equations, and the outcome is almost like it's more predictable. But I don't think you can say that I somehow have, like, you can't believe that 2 + 2 = 4 more than some other guy believes that 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah, true.
It's a very, very broken way to try and say what I'm trying to say. I find the whole idea of faith quantity levels almost being...
Yeah.
Maybe quantity might be
Hard to
the wrong word, Heinz, but I do believe that just like the parable of the talents, there are those of us who maximize on what we've been given.
Yeah.
At a fundamental
I would
level,
agree
there are
with
certain
that.
things we've all been given
I would agree with that.
as Christians, but then some of us dig deeper, study, appreciate, walk in those things more than others, and as such we benefit from them more. So the sort of the latent potential to enjoy the fruit of certain things is there in all of us, but we don't all appreciate it.
Yeah, that's well
I
said.
think for
Well
me,
said.
that's where the levels thing is.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an issue of semantics, but
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing, just from
Yeah.
different points of view.
yeah.
TJ, you hit it on the nose, man. I think that's a good place for us to end today. If you're listening to us, we didn't say this yet, but if any of you out there are listening to us, you want to know more about this issue, or you want to give us your thoughts on it, or just discuss other things, please drop us a line on facebook.com/ask1.
Ask one.
Amazing.
It is, wow,
really
good
good.
sustain, bro. Good sustain. But I think that's a wrap, guys. Thank you so much. This is such a cool
Yeah.
topic. And we look forward to hearing from all of you out there in podcast land. Please get hold of us. Let us know your thoughts, and maybe we'll build a show around it.
So much faith in this room.
Yeah, man.
I feel my faith has grown.
Ask One.
Yeah,
over
mine
and
too.
out.